Hello, hello. I'm so excited today to have Elly Ventura and Erin Levine. Is that how you say your name, Erin?
Levine.
Levine. I thought I must have mispronounced that. Sorry for that. But excited to have both of you on the show. And of course, as we were saying before we started, that Centric has played such a huge part in our journey. I don't think even Asim knows about this, but back in 2017, we were just exploring this idea that we should get into molded fiber, and we were at NRA, and we had seen these amazing products from Centric, and we literally sat him down and we said, Asim, we need time with you. And he was so gracious, and I think we must have spent close to a couple of hours, 2 hours, just chatting with him, picking his brains, what we should do. It was really exciting. So World Centric has been a huge part of our journey, and thank you guys for that.
Thank you. That's a great story. Yeah, and Asim, he's been around for in this industry for such a long time and is very well known. And I'm really happy to hear that he was able to be a resource for you. I'm sure he would be happy to do it today again if you needed him as well.
Yeah, we were actually supposed to get on a call a couple of weeks back, and we just didn't time it enough. But we will get on a call soon enough. So yeah,
Great.
we exchange notes from time to time. But
Nice.
yeah, what I'm excited about is this title. First of all, you guys call yourselves resource recovery managers. What does that even mean, and what does that entail? What do you guys actually do?
I'll
Erin.
take that one. I actually came up with the title. Um, I was hired out at World Centric as the zero waste manager, but about 1 month in, I was speaking with the SEAM, and he said, how's it all going? We did a check-in, and I said, I'm really just uncomfortable with the title of zero waste manager. And he said, how come? I said, well, is there such a thing as zero waste? And is that really what my job description entails, is to promote zero waste, which it's a very controversial issue if you're in the industry and you come from the business, because first and foremost, to hold this title of a zero waste professional, there's actually a certification, an accreditation that comes with it. It's the True Advisor accreditation, which I don't actually have. So I felt very uncomfortable from the start with that. The second is that, are we really just in this to recover resources? And really, that's more of the buzz term. I'm located in California, and the association I'm a part of is California Resource Recovery Association. And resource recovery is the name now that most policy managers are using instead of waste diversion. So I felt like that's really what I'm doing here at World Centric, is I'm identifying ways where our products can find their highest and best use at their end of life. So the resource recovery manager, a lot of people were very confused by that title, and we still have to explain it to this day. And so I asked for this title change. Asim was very on board. It was not an issue at all. And then a year and a half in, I brought Elly, and then our titles went from resource recovery. Mine was resource recovery manager, and then I went from to the West, and then Elly is resource recovery manager East. So we basically split the country, but have the same job duties. Kind
But
of. Elly can talk to more about. We do have nuances within our own regions.
I'm sure, but I want to know more about when you say resource recovery. Is it to do with whatever waste will be created? Will it be recovered? What does it actually entail? And maybe Elly, you take a shot at it, and then yeah, we get back to Erin.
Sure. So my background is, well, actually, it's in athletic training, and psychology is what my college degree is in. So I spent some time in higher ed as an athletic trainer and as a director of student activities, and then started a sustainability committee at the last campus that I worked at. And so titles for me have always just kind of been something on a business card that you hand out, right? But what my foray into this position was pre-led by 10 years at a solid waste management district in the state of Vermont, and we used, or were trying to get people not to say waste or trash anymore, but we were trying to get sustainable materials management to catch on. and it hasn't caught on yet, 12 years later. And so the resource recovery part, I can really parlay onto that Vermont responsibility and that terminology in Vermont, because the whole point of the legislation in Vermont was Act 148, or the Universal Recycling and Composting Law. And kind of the unprinted tagline of that was to get Vermonters to think differently about waste and to understand the value of what was left with something when they were finished with it. So resource recovery, I think, really, once people understand it, and Erin got some pretty interesting resumes when she posted my position a year and a half ago from some other kind of resource-related organizations. But resource recovery really is doing just that, right? Like, so Erin and I are responsible for many, many, many different things, which keeps us perfectly challenged and excited about coming to work every day. But really, I think what we both get most excited about is connecting customers who use World-Centric products to a circular end-of-life option for them. So networking with the composting community nationwide to be able to get people to divert our products to be composted, and then just supporting the industry at large to amplify the importance of expanding compost infrastructure to be able to give people the options for a good choice at end of life.
That's just wonderful, and I have a lot to talk about that, talk about with you on that. So we'll keep digging into the idea of the end of use, because otherwise, this whole question keeps coming up. It doesn't really get composted, and things like that. And I'm sure you guys hear it all the time. But we're going to dig into that. I digressed. Usually, I want to talk about how you got into this. So and you kind of parlayed into that, Ellie. So I'm going to start with Erin. Erin, talk to me about growing up. And I know you guys have had such interesting careers. And it's clear from your trajectory that you were clearly influenced towards going towards sustainability. So if you can remember some things that influenced you in your childhood or growing up that got you to where you are, and then we're going to ask Ellie as well.
Sure, yeah. I grew up in California. I'm a California native, true and true. In Southern California growing up, it was there. I'm a millennial, just say that now, but there was no real recycling happening until maybe I was in grade school. And one of the first memories I think I have of being exposed to waste management in a more efficient way is when there was a campaign for reduce, reuse, recycle that came to our school. I distinctly remember seeing a play on the stage where they represented it was a very demonstrative example for kids and showing them recycling is the future. This is the answer. And I remember running home to teach my family, we're going to get a recycling bin in our house. And it was like a very, exciting moment, because really we only had one bin. And so this was in the 90s, and we finally got a recycling stream, which then we recycled everything, whether it was appropriate or not, which now in my future career, I look back and wish I could educate my younger self. But that was probably one of my first memories. And then fast forward to college is where I was really exposed and got more interested as an adult, and how I got into the profession, which was that I had a roommate whose boyfriend started a company to recycle electronic waste. And so I first got into this thinking, I was doing a business course in my final year at St. Mary's College, and I had an opportunity to write a full business plan. And this was really fascinating to me, because he was doing a startup, and, we're in the Bay Area, and it's like, Silicon Valley has like all these tech companies, and it felt very, very appropriate, because recycling electronics was just not a full concept a lot of these corporate organizations were thinking about. So it came, and then he explained what was really happening improper disposal overseas and how toxic these chemicals are and the heavy metals that are used was just, and the videos and things I saw really resonated with me because I thought, wow, we could have a better system here. And it just simply made sense to me that we could do this domestically, that we could actually get the commodity value out of it, have a better, higher use. It started to click for me that why wouldn't we do this? It just didn't seem like it doesn't belong. Also, in the early 2000s in California, there was a ban for landfills to take in electronics. So it happily coincided with this reimbursement model that the state was giving to collectors. So it was actually a fairly lucrative business at the time because as a collection operation, we were receiving, per pound, and those large old CRT monitors that everyone had for their TVs or the computer screens they weighed on average 25, 30, 40, 50 pounds. So it was at the time very exciting. We called it the e-tsunami of the early 2000s because we saw a large volume. And so I was targeting companies that had in their basements, these corporate companies, they knew better than to dispose of it. It was also illegal, but they really didn't know truly how to discard it properly. So we came in there with this solution that, hey, we will actually take this off your hands. We will disassemble it. We'll sell the commodity. Like we were ensuring that it will get recycled domestically, which meant a lot to a lot of corporations at the time. It still does, but it was a bigger deal than it is now because everything's so thin and small and there's a lot of other outlets at this point. But in the early 2000s, that was very exciting. So it led me into this world of, wow, like what else is out there that we can recover as a resource? There you go, full circle, resource recovery. So I went from a collector and then I went to an actual recycler where they were doing the physical disassembly. And so I was working at a recycling plant. And because of that, we had a lot of customers that were MRFs, transfer stations, landfills, places that were actually seeing a higher volume of it improperly being discarded. So I got exposed more to the general waste management system in California and specifically in the Bay Area. So I got very familiar with being at a waste facility of all kinds of processing. So it to me sparked this, okay, now what else is out there? And I was attending a lot of trade organizations and all I was hearing about was organic waste because it was the next, it was one of these ways, sorry, if we could back up a second. The organic waste was getting a lot of attention because it was a natural way for us to eliminate greenhouse gases. It was all the reasons that we've heard about, that composting has all these benefits. But I thought, oh, that seems really fascinating to me because I was interested in the food system. I'm a gardener. I saw the hierarchy of waste and how impactful it could be to if we actually diverted our organic waste. So then I became into this interest of composting where at the time, Waste Management had compost facilities in California and they needed a full-time person to sell their finished compost. So I was the first person hired by Waste Management to go out and sell the final product to the agricultural community in California. So, and it was a very attractive space actually, because I got to work with vineyards in Napa and Sonoma who were very interested in sustainable agriculture and didn't really want to use any of the heavy fertilizers. They had a lot of incentive to use compost. And so I got to drive around these vineyards and go to the Napa Valley Grape Growers Association and have a very, sexy time selling compost. I don't know if you've heard that on this podcast before, but waste is sexy. So
and you were drinking wine along the way, so that's pretty good. That's a good job.
Well, it's funny. Everyone thought that was an immediate assumption, but I was in the fields, so there was no wine even there. They were just growing grapes. They were doing fruit, and so the assumption was always, oh, you're out drinking on the job. No, I was actually just working with soil and talking about soil health and nerding out on carbon
Erin, they didn't pay you in bottles of wine. Come on.
Missed
Wouldn't that have been
opportunity.
nice? I don't know if that could pay the bills, but it would have been a good time. So it was really fun. I got a lot of exposure to some very fascinating people that were in the agricultural space who taught me so much. And I started getting more interested in soil health and really this connection, to our food system. And that was, to me, I did that for a long time with a lot of pleasure and joy. I just really thought, and then seeing the end product after 3 years in place, when people are like not even going to need to buy compost anymore because their soil is healthy, like that was a very rewarding moment. When I remember this distinctly, highlight of my career is like, wow, the compost is actually improving your soil health to the point where you don't need it right now. It's very interesting that was the case. So then fast forward to, well, I've done I got an opportunity in between. I sold compost for waste management. Then I got an opportunity to work in San Francisco for a year doing a management training where I got to do every part of this operation. It was really exciting. I actually got to work on a sort line, sort trash from a construction and demolition debris MRF, that was interesting. I got to work at the scale house. I got to go along with the drivers. I got to do waste characterizations for the state. That was really where I got like more of my waste education, because I was so focused before on e-waste and then on finished compost that was my two areas. But in the end, I really wanted to go back to compost. So then I ended up selling compost again for another few years. But I saw this posting from World Centric 2.5 years ago, where it felt very natural to come upstream, if you will, to say, using my waste management and my specialty with organic waste, how I can apply that to the packaging world, because this is where a lot of the waste is generated. And I'm very passionate about eliminating single-use conventional plastics. So it felt like if I could have an opportunity to educate people about these alternatives and about how they can be part of the solution and not the problem, that felt very enticing to me. So, and I also knew that World Centric had an impeccable reputation in the industry. And coming from the composting space, I trusted the brand already, because as I was doing sorting, I knew that brand name and I knew World Centric. So I felt very comfortable with choosing to work at World Centric, that there's not greenwashing element, etc. So I came 2.5 years ago, and then I met Elly.
And we do want to, yeah, we do want to talk about that meeting. But before that, I think we'll talk about Elly's influences, and that was going to be my next question: the meeting of these spirits, So we got to get to that. But before that, Elly, you want to add that? And just so that you know, Erin, there's a bunch of questions that crop up as you were speaking, and I'm reading this fascinating book. It's called Material World. I think it's by Ed Conway, and it talks about different materials and more in depth about, say, concrete, which you were talking about, and the whole idea of how it kind of impacts, and how this whole thing called cement has created the modern economy in so many ways. And apparently there is, I don't remember the exact data, but there's like 600 something times of cement than all the organisms combined on this planet. That's the amount of concrete we have on the planet, by the way. But anyways, a different conversation. But it's so interesting, and of course you've dealt with those materials directly. But over to you, Elly. What were your influences?
Yeah, I got so caught up in Erin's story that I was kind of lost track of my own. But that's a good story, Erin. So I think way back when I was little, our stories are a little bit different. So I cannot remember a day in my house of not gardening, composting, or recycling. We did recycling before it was publicly available, or there wasn't a curbside bin option. So we separated. We piled up all of our newspaper, tied it with string, and took it to the paper drive at the school once a month. We took our cans to the scrapyard and got the money for the aluminum for the cans, and we crushed every can by hand so we could get more in the bag and be able to lessen the number of trips that we made there. I had my own strawberry patch when I was 6 or 7 and just used to eat them right off of the vine, and would eat so many that I just used to break out in hives. That's the only thing that's ever given me hives. Well, that, and I'll share an unrelated story. So I found a wedding dress that I liked. 20 years. I'll be married 20 years this year. Found a wedding dress, picture of a dress that I liked. Was able to go to a wedding store where they had this exact dress, and I'm taking a leap here, admitting this publicly, but this dress had a fur, like a I don't know if it was I don't even know what kind of animal it was, but it was a real fur collar overlay, and they left that on the dress when they put it on me. That's the second thing that made me break out in hives. I was like, oh, take it off.
Yeah, it was clear that wearing animals wasn't for you.
Not my thing. Unfortunately, I have such a talented aunt that she was able, I shouldn't say this publicly either, but she was able to recreate almost the same dress because she's incredibly talented. So it all worked out, but the 2 times in my life, too many strawberries and real fur just don't work for me. So that, we just always did it. We always, and we're always outside and enjoying nature, and we camped a lot, and we, nurtured our own soils, and we just rain, sleet, snow, or hail. We weren't the postal service, but we were outside all the time. And I think just that relationship and respect that you develop by appreciating and interacting with nature so commonly really rooted me in, not to overuse the word, but in a sustainable way of living. I have a lot of improvements that I could make, but for me, it's always been about thinking of your impact and what you can do to minimize it before, during, and after, right? So I'm grateful for that upbringing where that was just normal for us. And I found myself in other places in the world now. I live in Kentucky right now. So recycling is not at the forefront for the majority of communities in the Midwest or in the Southeast even. So I find that my influence on just the way I choose to live my life and the decisions that I make around materials and waste management are more influential than I like to admit sometimes. But I try to use that not to be preachy, but just to be an example of ways to navigate the perceived challenges of being a responsible environmental citizen.
And good on your parents to and inculcate that in you right from the word go. I wish I could show you the place where I am. I'm in a farming commune in rural India right now, and part of our lives we spend there. And this is exactly how we live. Everything is segregated. Just this way is all the compost, and it's all, literally no plastic comes in, at least as bags. Of course, some of it is flexible packaging, which we have to keep taking it out and seeing what we can do with it. And this is where my wife and I spent a lot of time, right? We were in India, and then I ended up shifting to US, and it was so tough for me to see the amount of material. And then, of course, we put it in the recycling bin, but we don't know what really happens and how much it gets downcycled and what have you. Mm-hmm. So it's been very painful. And in fact, my wife grew up in West Virginia, so you can imagine what it's like for me when I visit my in-laws.
I can.
And they are conscious people, but it's like there's so much styrofoam still, and people are just using it without kind of caring. So it's been a challenge, but beautiful to hear about how you grew up and this deep connection in a way. So yeah, then that moves us very quickly to how you guys met. I hear that's a fascinating story. That's what I've been informed. So I'm excited to hear.
So I'll start, Erin, and then you can take it away from there. So I worked at a different packaging company prior to coming to World Centric. So while I was at the solid waste district in Vermont, one of the things that I was most excited about, I kind of refer to now as my legacy project with them, was helping to write a federal grant to be able to transform a vacated biosolids composting facility into an aerated static pile food scrap facility. And it's still operating today processing about 6 tons a week. So we were super, super tiny. One of my points of pride is that for our first year of operation, we collected a 5-gallon bucket of contamination. That was it for 12 months of operation, serving about 26,000 humans. So I'll just give the secrets to that success is that we, as a solid waste management operation, we had 6 drop-off facilities that were all fully staffed. And so that was the main way that materials came in. So we had site attendants there who were monitoring and talking to people as they were bringing their materials in, and then they were hand picking out of those totes. And then we are such a small quantity operator. The name of it is Lamoille Soil. Lamoille is the name of the county in Vermont, and people struggled to pronounce it. So I was like, hey, I love a good rhyme. Let's call it Lamoille Soil. So the name has stuck. And then because we were so small and tipping such a small amount, our fastidious operator there was able to handpick when each tote was tipped as well. So we had really tight ops on it to be able to have that low of contamination, which is pretty awesome and not always common in the commercial composting world. So that, similar to Erin, right? I was in the commercial composting industry and really wanted to get that facility up and running to capture and divert as much material as we could. Keep it out of the landfill. Let's do something good with it. And I've always said, and I was going to say this in my origin story because something Erin said made me think of this. Like whenever I was educating people about the value of materials as part of my outreach manager job in Vermont, I would say, I can't recycle this plastic bottle in my backyard and turn it into a vest or into carpet or into fabric. I can't do that. But I can take my garden waste and my apple core and my rotten lettuce, and I can turn that into something amazing. And my personal and professional opinion is that compost is a much more powerful solution to climate change than recycling, hands down. I mean, it's not even a fair contest. So that to me made it comfortable to go from commercial composting to compostable packaging in order to increase awareness, increase diversion, and create opportunities to create more of that amazing compost as a soil amendment, a really valuable soil amendment. So my responsibility was kind of similar to what I'm doing with World Centric, but I was responsible for keeping an eye on the whole country, composting infrastructure, food packaging legislation, a sales team that covered the whole country. And so part of that work, and Erin and I still do this, we are active in a lot of community and local composting organizations. So state composting chapters, the US Composting Council, municipal advisory boards. And Erin and I were both in the same meeting for an organization in California. And we went around and did introductions. And as I was listening to Erin tell her much shorter version of her story than she shared with us today, in my head, I was like, wow, that sounds a lot like my professional journey. I need to meet this person. So I messaged her and I was like, hey, I think you and I have a lot to talk about. Would you want to meet? And Erin was very suspicious. She's like, "Ooh, competitor! You want all of my secrets." And so, if you know Erin, her face gives away everything that's in her head. So
that's what I've been told so many times. Say, can't you hide things on your face?
No.
So even without knowing Erin as well as I know now, I could tell in her face that she was like, I'm not so sure about this, but I'll give it a shot. And Erin, that's when I'm going to pass it over to you to tell the rest.
She hit the nail on the head. My face did say it all. I was skeptical. I wanted to know what her intentions were by contacting me. Was she trying to uncover our secrets? I didn't know exactly what was why she would reach out. And then when we connected, I thought, okay, it was more obvious that we had a personal connection versus her trying to be a corporate spy or something. But then we met in person at an event called Waste Expo, one of the largest industry-wide organization meetings, conferences, and in Vegas. And we were on the same tour together, or on the same bus at some point, and she was very welcoming and asked me to join. I was by myself at the time, and so she extended an invite to hang out with her and my competitors at the time. But it was really fun, and I thought that I just really liked Elly as a person, and I knew professionally her reputation was impeccable. She presents herself very, very well, just like you can see today. It felt very genuine, is all I'm saying. And I knew she was a fellow, let's just say it, waste nerd. And specifically the compost piece, like she was describing, that compost has that impactful, unlike any other waste that's generated. It just has this power behind it to really have the most effect on climate change. So I think that we really agreed and aligned with the composting piece, and that we're nerds. We nerded out together. Let's just be honest. So
Can I join the club too?
Yeah.
Always taking members. You're more than welcome.
Yes. So yeah, and then we had I was overwhelmed by the amount of workload at World Centric, because like Elly, I was monitoring the whole country, or I was attempting to, but I'm based in the West Coast, and that's naturally my emphasis. And the West Coast legislation was becoming, for foodware, was becoming overwhelming. So I asked Asim if we could create a second position to handle the East Coast. And so then we initially found a variety of the wrong people, and then I sent the link to Elly, and she said, I'll see if I know anybody. And then 2 weeks later, I got a phone call, and she said, I think I'm ready. And so I gotta be honest, when I designed this position and wrote the job description, I had Elly in mind 100%, hoping that she would be convinced to come over and work with me. Which
you basically manifested it.
I manifested it. I really did. Every other candidate I was pretty disappointed with, until Elly came, and I knew that we were going to have a great working relationship, and that our East sales team was going to be well supported, and I was right.
That's
Elly has kept
story.
me on my toes. She is so diligent. I can't even explain to you. She's such a blessing to work with.
Nice, so good. And
Thanks.
Elly, just so that you know, one of my other early inspirations was Joe Frankel, the company you were with.
Oh, really?
So
wow.
he and I met in England a while, again, 2016, 17. And we spoke less than 6 months back, because he's off to surfing and what have you.
Yeah.
So
He's done
we
a
were
big
just
life
catching
change.
up. What are you doing? He's doing some records. He's saying, I'm back to my true love. And, so it's
Good
such
for
an
him.
interesting small world, right? But
Yeah,
let's switch to
definitely.
World Centric, because, World Centric has been such a leader in this whole domain. And Asim started really early. 2004 is what I read. So talk to us a little more about the genesis of World Centric and how that has evolved. And of course, we'll talk a little more about the special values that World Centric holds so dear. But let's talk about the company itself and how it evolved. I guess, Erin, you might want to start that one. You've been there longer.
But Elly actually tells the origin story better than me. I'm going to let her take
Sure.
All right. And you're seeing our working relationship and how we support each other and play to each other's strengths. So I love the story of this. So as you mentioned, Ved, I was at Vegware too, and I thought they had a great story. But with Asim still being our founder and decision maker and sole owner of World Centric, it really continues to be a unique carve out in the compostables industry. So yeah, in 2004, he was really passionate about increasing awareness about social injustices and extreme poverty and environmental degradation. So started hosting documentary viewings and group gatherings to talk about these issues. And after a couple of years, decided that relying on grants and donations was not super stable way to run a business. So started selling fair trade and compostable food service items as a revenue line to help support those events, those awareness raising events. And then pivoted in about 2009. The compostable part was really catching on and getting really popular. So pivoted then to a for-profit business selling compostable food service ware. And we still only sell compostables. We don't have any petroleum-based plastic or recycled content plastic. We're purely compostable. And have then in order to maintain the reason that he started World Centric in the first place, earmarked 25% of profits to continually be annually donated to these nonprofit groups that are working in those areas of environmental improvement, grassroots education, sanitation, alleviating extreme poverty. So we have a really tight criteria specific to why he started the company in the first place. And that is really the biggest point of pride for all of us who work here, is that giving program. And I'm a member of the volunteer staff giving team. I will be for the second year this year. And an amazingly fulfilling experience to be part of that team, to find and learn about and get to know these organizations who were donating through this one giving program that World Centric offers was incredibly rewarding. It was just a great experience, and I'm looking forward to starting that whole process again this year. So in 2010, back to World Centric, we became one of the first B Corp certified organizations, and we continue to hold that certification as well. And just have been very conscientious from sourcing to shipping to delivery about the impact that our materials make and the choices that we make as a company that manufactures stuff, right? We realize that it takes inputs to make the products that we deliver. So we try to be really mindful about making, really deliberating about all of those choices along the way of that chain, and then how we can be good stewards for people and the planet through our product and the management of those. Erin, what did I forget?
And ask Erin, do you want to add anything? That's an amazing journey, especially considering, like, what I'm told is over $17 million is what has been donated over time through the 25%. And 25% is a very high benchmark. Even the company that I work with, it's pretty high, but it's 5%. It's not even, close to. I'm like, okay, we need to do more, than what we are doing. So that's kind of fascinating. And of course, you mentioned that the product choices, and I totally agree with you. There is no such thing as recycling. It's only downcycling, and you can only downcycle that much. So that must be a huge part of the whole, the whole process. How do you choose what to go for? So how do you guys do that? Is there a process that, okay, we're going to do this and not do this? Because I'm sure the customer wants a certain performance, a certain price. Does that become a challenge?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a full-time PD team, so product development, and from the beginning, what I've learned about World Centric is that we design with the end in mind. So the choices we make, everything from material selection is very important. Yes, it has to perform, it has to function, it has to be cost effective. But how can you do all those things yet still maintain a plant-based product and have it certified for compostability? So it's for me personally, it's just been an interesting journey to realize and learn. Again, I was like 2.5 years into this packaging industry, to learn about things like the barrier properties and what actually goes into the research on that, and how innovation is going to make a difference in the future for those materials. I'm experiencing in California and the rest of the country, there's a lot of attention around compostable plastics right now, and how a lot of composters don't want to actually receive that. So looking to the future, how are we going to live in a world where we can have functional material, again, back to the barrier properties, that are also, they also align really with what composters want to accept legitimately, that don't contribute to contamination, that degrade in the proper time frame, and that align with their practices. And technology makes a play in that, but it's 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 just been an interesting way to educate the public, meaning that people expect, and they've been demanding, more cellulosic based materials. They want paper, they want fiber, and because a lot of times compostable plastics are classified as synthetic or under the same category as conventionals. So educating the public around the fact that compostable plastics are derived from plants and that still can offer the same functionality. That's been a challenge, especially educating the composters about, and coming from the composting space, it was all lumped together in my mind until I learned a lot more about what it means to be certified compostable, what it actually, what it means. You know, these tests are very telling. They go through the rigorous standards, as you know, if you're aware of ASTM standards. It's no small feat to have a product that passes that. And then in addition, I've been participating, and we've participated in field degradation tests to prove, again, that these products are disintegrating and properly biodegrading in the time frame that's desired, not leaving any toxic residue behind, and truly beneficial for the soil. And again, that's my motivation in all of this, is how can we figure out this closed loop system, contribute positively to the circular economy. I know I deviated somewhat with your product design question, but our angle of World Centric does come from, how do we still get education to the public on what functions, what they need, what the composters need. It's been, man, it's so interesting what's happening too, because compostable plastics has gotten such a bad rap overall, and we're really taking a lot of heat behind it right now, and it's just unfortunate, because I wish that the general public and really the composters and policymakers can see, bio-based materials as a higher and better solution to what we currently have, as our conventional plastics are polluting our planet. We're in this massive crisis, and it's just, it's so frustrating to me. Elly, what did I leave behind?
The one other thing about making choices with materials is that we have a sustainability manager on staff, and she's running comparisons, life cycle analysis comparisons on materials before we even use them, right down to how much energy is used in the factory where things are manufactured, or what is the transportation distance between the feedstock to the production facility, like really impressively down to the detail, and then feeds that to our PD team to help make a decision on whether or not that is the type of material, the source where we want to procure that material from, and what the actual calculations, environmental calculations are. So I think that's really special and unique too. And she does fabulous work. It's really impressive. And so that I think adds to our diligence in being conscientious about our overall impact.
Yeah, and I was actually going through your website, and it was fascinating, because normally when you go to a product company's website, it's all about the product. And there's actually, it's in a way literally hidden. Oh yeah, you can check our catalog. but it's a lot about what we're really trying to change, and how we are working with communities, and how does composting work, and the things, Erin, you were talking about earlier. And that was interesting. But what was also interesting for me, and I'm going to pull you back a little bit into products. I know your heart lies more on the end of use, but I'm just fascinated with what you guys are doing. So when I look at the catalog, it's so huge, right? There's all kinds of things. So does that not lead to a huge inventory management issue, and also in terms of you were talking about sourcing. So I know that you may be sourcing from far off. So what do you source? There'll be a certain shipping time. Is that a huge logistical nightmare to maintain that kind of inventory for all the products that you guys are doing?
I'm going to put a pin in that. We'll come back to it. But I want to go back to your comment about our website and how products are like kind of hidden. Yeah. And that goes back to why Asim started this company in the first place, right? Raising awareness and educating viewers and readers about these realities of extreme poverty and environmental degradation, and solutions that can help to solve those. So again, another unique carve out for how we approach sales of compostables here.
Yeah, it's totally clear by your website that that's where the heart lies.
Yeah, yeah, good. So inventory and logistics fascinates me. I like it, just blows my mind, and we have a whole department of people who keep track of all of that stuff. Erin, how many? 3, 4 people, I think, who keep track of containers and ships and warehouses, and yeah, I think.
5 actually, but still, their full-time job is managing our inventory supply chain. It's impressive. I think to your point,
I can imagine. Yeah.
we have a lot of products, and demand fluctuates. It's like, so it's just interesting to see how we can maintain that. Yeah.
We try to rely a lot on forecasting from our sales managers, like really pushing them to get out their crystal balls and really give numbers for how many cases you're going to need for especially bigger customers, right? Because a large order, we're tight on inventory. We're pretty efficient about it. So if we have a new customer who needs a significant amount of cases of one particular product, and usually it seems like those are always the popular ones, like the 9-inch plate or the 8-ounce hot cup or something that everybody's already buying a lot of anyway. If we onboard a new customer with significant volume, it could deplete our warehouse, our domestic warehouse supply. So forecasting is really important. I think anyone who is in the business of product movement could always be better at forecasting, but that is a really important guesstimate that logistics relies on and tries to game out from there. And then just historical ordering, right? We look at seasonality, like we're heading into the fall, so anticipating soup cups are probably going to be more popular. So we'll do an increase in order on the soup bowls to be able to have enough here for when the season changes. And so that those are some of the strategies. Forecasting and seasonality, I think, are probably 2 of the bigger ones, and then just historical ordering.
Yeah, and I'm sure with AI coming in, it will only get better with all the data that you guys have accumulated over time. The other thing which you guys were mentioning before, and again, I think World Centric is so rooted in product development and design. I've always noticed that designs are very unique. Like, at least in the beginning, and I'm talking again 7, 8 years back, everything else was bleached and World Centric was unbleached. And of course, things have transitioned from there. And again, I think it's close to the idea of ecological balance, and how do we make sure that we are staying true to our knitting. And that was clear just by this one choice. And it wasn't until later that everybody started shifting to unbleached. It was World Centric that was kind of leading that charge and not compromising on that. The other one, which I was again reading, was this whole idea of the Leaf Plus products, which was very interesting. So I would love to hear your take on the whole PFAS thing in US, and then of course, with this Leaf Plus, how you guys are tackling it to be able to make sure that you're getting it right as you go along.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wonder for the unbleached issue. I think that's right, a unique thing that set World Centric apart. And to me, that material and seeing it unbleached creates that sense that it's earthy, that it naturally can be composted. It looks more natural. It has that look and feel. So I think inherently, to know a product is compostable, that's really important, starting with the aesthetics. especially when you're talking about food service packaging. We're dealing with chefs who are putting, their food into this material, but then to know that along with your food scraps, you can compost it because it hopefully can indicate naturally by the material selection and being unbleached that should be part of our cycle, our natural cycle of organic waste. So it is an attraction. It's always been. And I just want to say on that note that it's been advantageous to us because there's legislation now for labeling on compostables, and the material either, like for Washington State, needs to be green, beige, or brown. And because our products are naturally brown because we don't bleach them, we already are in compliance. So it's like one of these things that it's just been the right choice from the beginnings. And Asim has always made rather bold decisions, and I think this was one of them. And we were an early adopter, so it's just been a really good journey. I just wanted to address that first because I think it's really important. And then on PFAS. So when I started is when the PFAS bans were rolling out in various states in the US for food service packaging. And it was a logistical nightmare, I think, to manage a new product line. So let me step back. Our Leaf Plus solution was developed in-house. We did 6 years plus, more, potentially even more. But when Asim first got wind of it, he had developed a dedicated staff to do research on how we can find a suitable alternative that functions yet is still plant-based. All of those things combined were extremely challenging, and I think it took years and years of testing and development to come up with our final Leaf Plus solution. So it is a proprietary solution. So I think there's a patent pending right now, but other than that, what we know about it is that we did get it tested through the NSF program for toxicology. So they do a chemical hazard assessment to confirm that there is nothing potentially toxic for humans or marine environment. And it easily passed. We had to do a formula disclosure to them, and it was through a program called Chem Forward Safer Packaging, which was a pilot from the Sustainable Packaging Coalition, SPC. So we were one of the first to voluntarily put our formula through this chemical hazard assessment through NSF, and we're proud to say that it is part of this. It's designated as safer, which is great because what the biggest question out there is, okay, if it's not PFAS, what is it? And is it going to eventually come out to say it's toxic and we're still, it's harmful for human or marine or any of the environment? So that it has been really challenging to educate the public about PFAS in general, that it's been used in everything, so ubiquitous in so many products, but the food service products and food service packaging, it's been a journey to have it roll out. And so we prioritize the states that have passed it first, and then we voluntarily phased out PFAS out of all of the molded fiber packaging and paper products. So there's no longer anything we're producing with PFAS, which is really great. But then you come back to this functionality question, because people were so used to having PFAS as part of their as the functionality, that it doesn't leak, that it has this, grease proof, the oil barrier, the properties that PFAS really was great at. We've had to now, figure out, it performs, we think our solution performs really well, but does it perform just like PFAS? Not in my experience. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect solution. And people have been used to that. They've been used to just putting their greasy, food in the packaging and have it not seep through. But, there's a time limit on it. It's meant to disintegrate. It's meant to actually fall apart in a certain time frame. So we've had customers that have even time stamped their product to say, you need to use it by this point, because it's, if it's heavily greased, or you have the salad dressing in it, for example, it's going to start leaking at some point. So Perfect, not perfect. It's a wide variety, but I'm really glad overall that I work for a company that voluntarily phased it out, and that we have a functioning, really proprietary, exciting solution to bring to market.
Yeah, and one part you didn't mention there, Erin, is the cost side. As soon
Um,
as you go
about
PFAS
that.
free, you're adding like 15,
Yeah.
20% to the cost, which sometimes, as you would be more aware than me, your competition is not. So there's a lot of products out there I find that has not removed the PFAS chemicals, and for all the reasons that you're mentioning. And of course, there's a huge debate: does it really migrate into food? But I guess that's not a debate anymore. We have to go ahead and remove
Mhm.
it anyways. So, but with that in mind, how are you tackling competition? Because I was at NRA whatever a couple of months back, and my gosh, there were like what 60 stalls of molded fiber. Earlier, we would go say 6, 7, 8 years back before COVID, and there would be like seven or eight, maybe, and then they were doing these kind of products. How is that working for World Centric? Has that been a challenge, or you just have a dedicated base of customers who know what you're doing is going to be very, very um, puritanical and from a place of a mission driven kind of company? Does that work, or ultimately it comes down to economics, and that's 2 cents less, and that's how much does that impact World Centric?
Uh, a lot, all of those things. We did not take a price increase when we brought our no intentionally added PFAS formulation fiber products to the U.S. So it was I wasn't here at that point, but we all knew that World Centric wasn't taking a price increase. So there was a lot of talk about how they were doing that, and I think that was again another bold decision by Asim to keep his products available to everybody, right? But we're in sales, and in sales, the bottom line is I have to buy my food, I have to pay my staff. I don't want to spend an exorbitant amount of money on packaging. So it does come down to price a lot. We don't win every bid by any means, but we do have a really strong fan base too. People who know World Centric are pretty excited and bought in to World Centric. So that is an advantage for us too. And then our sales managers are tenacious in a good way, in a gentle way, actually. So they sniff out leads, they hunt down opportunities. And one thing that was really attractive to me when I was considering coming to work for World Centric is that we don't always look like, for us, a target is an operation that's still using styrofoam, right? If our sales team walks in and they're already using compostables of some sort, would we want it to be ours? Of course, because it's ours, right? But they're not using foam or they're not using plastics, so we're good with that, right? That is the mission of how we how we operate at World Centric. And so that was really attractive to me too. So there's plenty of opportunities to be made. There are plenty of new people to introduce World Centric to. And I think that the reputation that's come up a couple of times in the market also helps us to increase customer lists as well.
So, Erin, just an add-on to that before we extend that. The other thing I noticed with World Centric, and this may be just because World Centric is so visible in the retail space. So I
Mhm.
see, these ranges of smaller packs, and these cutlery, and well branded, all brown again, from the covers, which is so cool. And how much of the business is B2B and versus B2C? Is the B2C version really that big, or like most other molded fiber companies, that's more visible, but the reality is that we are all going to sell more B2B. So how does that stand up?
Yeah. No, you hit the nail on the head. Retail is actually a pretty small portion of our business overall, and we're starting to expand more on it. So it's exciting because I think, again, because we're only compostables, I do think that's our advantage in the marketplace, is that we're pure play. We don't have and our PET, sorry, the recycled PET material, for example. We don't have anything but compostables. So I think that, and we've recently got our molded fiber certified for home compostability. And I think that gives us a big advantage because a lot of issues around, well, if I'm not going to be able to compost it at an industrial site, why buy it? And we've given, like Elly said, we have our sustainability manager on staff who does our life cycle assessments and tries to sway people from the beginning of life choices. However, if they don't see an end of life option in their region, they kind of disregard our product potentially. Like I've heard when I've promoted the concept of being compostable, I've heard in feedback, oh, is it combustible? And things like that, because people are not even aware that's not a regular term in some regions of the country that just simply don't have organics collection, don't have community composters, don't have any outlet really or any access to manage their organic waste.
And that wasn't in Kentucky, just for the record.
I was just going to say, wait till you use regenerative.
Yes. Oh no, that goes right. So I do think that the addition of home compostability, it increased the access to a lot of people because anyone can home compost. And if it's certified for home compostability, it takes a lot longer, but it will decompose at some point. I say it's, I don't mean to laugh, but it's so variable for backyard systems that it's hard to say, oh, it's going to degrade in 1 year. You'd like to say that in certainty, but it's hard to say that.
And that certification just lets people know that it's safe for their pile too, right? Like it's not going to leave behind anything unseemly or dangerous.
Yeah, I do think those are two things that we've seen. The pure play, the home compostability side, yes, and our retail hopefully will be growing, but our food service and selling bulk for distributors and using our broker system has been the number one area where we've grown. And so we're working a lot with corporate campuses, with college campuses, generally like a lot of chain restaurants, and we're designing specific items for them as well, which is really exciting because I think we have this really great this team that can work with a company that has sustainability goals. And I really think that they opt for World Centric because they can see from an ESG standpoint as well, and you have to meet all these goals, we can kind of check the box quite a bit for a lot of the criteria. And I do think having our custom design department and custom design really helps the end user get a product that they can function for that specific customer base and for whatever the application is. So then we also are, as Elly and I are very aware, we track legislation. So there's a lot of limits to areas and regions that these companies might operate in that we make them aware about. For example, the coloring scheme that's required. We'll let people know you need to do whatever the criteria is to meet that area in the legislation. And a lot of companies are very concerned about being in compliance, of course. So we help with all of those things. So I feel like combined, we have a very good setup for a lot of big organizations that have sustainability goals to meet for compostable packaging.
And I just love that outlook, which you've it actually starts with your title, the resource management kind of side. But, and we are trying this as a company, we're trying this in India as well. A lot of beta work on closing the loop. You go in with the entire offering, one kind of dustbin or a trash can or even a composter at times. And we are now experimenting even with the idea that how do you set up a system where the food waste and the cutlery waste all goes into a single biogas composter. So it's very interesting. So the idea is that you put all that in, and of course there's a lot of wet waste. So you're able to create biogas that is piped into the kitchen. And then you get the compost. It's actually desecrated, dehydrated waste, which of course, you're losing 90% moisture, so much easier to take to the field. So that's an experiment that we are running, again, coming from a very puritanical thought that, ultimately we can talk all about working with good products, but in the end, if they end up in the landfill, have we done our work? So but it's still a beta test for us. So I just want to know from your experience, how has that been? You talked about, Erin, you mentioned college campuses, for example. Is there more receptivity there? If there is a composting service in the end, are you able to? And I know you guys have the whole hog of products. You can provide all of it. So are you finding more receptivity with the customers? Is that a good place to kind of position a value prop for the customer?
Oh, Elly, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I was putting my thoughts together in my head. Yeah, I think that we can't, just because it's a college campus doesn't mean they're automatically interested and ready to do it, right? What I have found through my career is that there's usually a green champion on in whatever organization it is. One of my favorite stories is a high school in Vermont. There was an environmental club, and they, started as sophomores, and by the time they were seniors, they finally got the entire school to have a compost bin in front of the house and in the cafeteria and in the kitchen, and convince the school board to pay for a composter to come pick it up and actually manage that material. And also in Vermont, one of my favorite stories to demonstrate that policy works. So when I started in Vermont in 2012, that law that I've already mentioned, Act 148, had been passed, but it was a phase-in implementation for it. And as the outreach manager, I was required to go inform businesses about their requirements and the timeline of such requirements. So about 2 years before the food scrap ban went into effect for businesses who were generating half a ton or more of organic waste, of organic material, I would go do visits and say, hey, this is coming. You're going to have to recycle your plastics and metals and cardboard. And then the year after that, you're going to have to subscribe to a food scrap diversion program. Vermont's the Green Mountain State, but there is a lot of Vermont pride and some convictions to how things should be done. And I had more than one unpleasant confrontational conversations about these requirements. Like, you can't tell me what to do. The government's not, this is overstepping. But most commonly it was, well, I'm not going to do that until they make me, or till I have to. So one particular restaurant owner in town, gave me the, I'm not doing it. I don't have time for this. I'm recycling, and that's good. A year and a half later, he walked himself into my office and was like, hey, is Elly here? And I was like, oh, and I kind of like looked around, made sure my coworkers were, able to witness this exchange. And he said, hey, I'm ready now.
He didn't come in with a sledgehammer, right?
He did not. So, but he was ready. So we sat down and we went through his catalogs and we showed him what to order, and we connected him with a composter. We designed his waste disposal system for the restaurant. We helped him do back of the house policies for kitchen prep. And so a firsthand experience that policy has teeth, and that's pretty motivated because policy has enforcement with it, which usually leads with education first, right? You did this wrong. This is how you can correct it. You have 30 or 60 days to do so before we come back. So that works. Another thing that we've found, so the Green Champions policy, and then as Erin mentioned, those environmental, social, and governance requirements that a lot of corporations are looking to score high in. We can help with that too, not only with our products, but also with the life cycle analysis and assessments that we can provide, the end of life program management that we can help them with. And I think those are probably the three that really are kind of the most eager to embrace us as a compostable packaging company.
Yeah, and it's always fascinating for me, and I hear this argument all the time, that it's not mandated yet, so we don't have to do it. Like, come on, guys, we are still citizens of this planet. But yeah, I see that point. And staying with your wheelhouse, I just would like to know how challenging is it to work with composters? Because you're trying to connect composters. But what I've heard is that many of the composters are hesitant because of the different degradation, even speeds of product, a PLA versus a molded fiber versus the food scraps. So, how challenging has it been to get the composters onboarded?
Yeah. So, Erin, can I start?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because we have different answers, I think. So I think that the most challenging reality is our lack of infrastructure in general, right? We struggle in the US to have organic processing facilities located conveniently to the outlets where we need them to be. Permitting is really hard. It's expensive to get new ones up and running. So there are some real challenges to accessibility. I think that is the big thing. And then, Erin is working in the sixth largest GDP in the world. So the challenges that she faces and the regulatory landscape that she's working in is a lot more rigorous and challenging than anything east of the Rockies. We aren't without rules or policy here. Minnesota is pointed to right now as a really great I affectionately call them the California of the Midwest because they are really bringing in a lot of Californian type of policy.
Erin, I want to know what's behind that laughter, but we'll get to that. Elly.
And I have had an experience where individually composters are ready to listen, right? They understand that this is a waste diversion modality and that compostables can play a role in that. What I hear most often is that end product conversation, right? And we had spoken about PFAS earlier or the bioplastics, right? I get a lot of questions about what can't I see if I put your products in my as a feedstock? What can't I see in my end product? And Erin can speak to that a little bit more as well, because we do have a National Organic Standards Board meeting coming up this fall, and Erin's done a lot of work around that. So that's my perspective, and it might be interesting to hear how Erin answers that same question.
And of course, why do you think Minnesota is the California of the Midwest?
Just being based in California, we're really, I think Elly's trying to point out, we have extreme policy. We really are trendsetters in advancing the environmental awareness. Our environmental policies are extreme. That's all. It's just an interesting thing to think that there's a state in the Midwest that's mirroring California and this coastal community that we're in. Just nothing more, nothing less than just Midwest mocking California seems bizarre. So yeah, I am involved in policy in California, and so there's a lot of things happening in this space. First is that we have, and I'll get to the composters because this is very connected to what challenges we're facing about educating composters. So we have two things. We have a truth in labeling law for compostables. So compostables in California can't have any greenwashing terms, any misleading terms like biodegradable or oxidegradable, these terms that have become synonymous with no regulation behind it, no scientific evidence to claim that it is true. So very fortunately, there is a law that says you have to have compostable labeled if you're selling it, and you have to meet ASTM standards. So that's good. Those are good. Those are very strong things. But the composters in California have been very hesitant to adopt compostables as part of their inbound feedstock for a few reasons. And one major one is that they're unable to tell the difference between conventional plastics and compostable plastics. And fiber that has a lining, you cannot tell if it's a poly lined or compostable line product. I think that's probably one of our number one challenges is identification. And coupling that is yes, we have to use compostable, but there's no other universally adopted symbol to indicate that your product has gotten certified. There are third-party certifiers that are requiring the use of their logo on product, but that hasn't eliminated any real, or hasn't really called for a full solution yet. I think we need that universal symbol. We need something that's going to be a simple identifier to indicate that you've met ASTM standards, that your test or that your product does qualify for compostable. There is a lot of hesitancy also about the degradation timeframes. So I think that, and does it really contribute positively? Does it add a nutritional value to your compost? Because really composters they're motivated by selling the end product, which is a nutrient-rich soil amendment. And if it's adding no nutritional value, why adopt it? Is it really bringing food scraps along with it? And that's been the question from the beginning: is how do I ensure? Yes, because it's a food contact item, so like a paper plate that still has your leftover scraps on it, you can compost it. So it is bringing maybe some nitrogen from that food scraps, but is that really happening? And people, it's just this big question of how much food scrap, how much of value is it bringing? I think that's been the bigger question. And then back to the degradation stuff. We've done a lot of work in field around acceptability. Monitoring. We've participated in the field test. So there's a really great program that's the Compostable Field Test Program. So it's an acronym, CFTP. And it is, I want to get that clear, but it's been funded for the last 9 years by the Compost Research and Education Foundation. It's another acronym, CREF. But they're a nonprofit group that stemmed from the U.S. Composting Council to initiate research programs like the field testing for compostables. So it's been a really great aid for us to promote and to also participate in, to watch our products. And I personally did a field test where I put the products inside a pile, watched the time frame where it broke down, and then actually had to sift it out at the end, weigh it, really get a technical on what worked in. And what we found was that the compostable plastics were the first thing to degrade. Between heat and moisture, they easily, in an industrial site that got up to really high temperatures, we did not see residual of the compostable plastics. In every single bag, we put 20 mesh bags inside these piles. And you can read about the methodology. We can hopefully drop a link so the listeners can learn more about this program, because it is very, very valuable, I think, to understanding more about how certified compostable products are performing in the field. Long story, but the compostable plastics were a success, and they found that across the board. It's been very, very obvious that those, under the right conditions, can easily disintegrate without any microplastics, anything that we saw. So that's number one. The fiber materials took a lot longer. The paper materials took a lot longer, but they're full carbon. So other carbonaceous materials also do take a lot longer. And then what we've seen in California, where we lack moisture, is that it does take even longer, because they do need a fair amount of moisture to aid with disintegration. So that's a big piece of it, is like the composter confidence. Is it going to break down? And to Elly's point, what can't I see with my human eye, with my naked eye? What is it leaving behind? Is it leaving anything detrimental? But we can point back to the ecotoxicity reports if it's certified, which I do rely on our stringent test 2.2. And Elly brought up one more point that I want to bring up, and then I'm going to be done. But so you can't, in California, it's part of our law, so our truth in labeling law, that you can't, after 2026, take in compostable packaging unless it's approved as acceptable feedstock for the National Organic Program, because then you can't sell your final product as certified organic. So there's a big issue underway about, right now, compostables are labeled as a synthetic. They are prohibited from composters to accept, because they are classified under all synthetics. So they can't sell their final product as organic if they accept compostable plastics. So there's a petition underway, and the National Organic Standard Board, who is the advisor to the USDA under the National Organic Program, they are taking this issue under technical review right now to figure out if they are going to allow compostables to be part of the feedstock. If this petition is successful, California will succeed or will be allowed to then process compostable packaging, which is a huge success. We have 32 industrial facilities in California. We have more, we have a dense population, and it's mandatory to recycle your organics here. It would be a huge win for our industry if this were to go forward. I am unfortunately not very hopeful, only because of what I've heard up to this point, and it's under technical review. So I'm hoping they do take this under serious consideration because it's very impactful. But the biggest question is like, does it still have PFAS? Like, is it going to be certified? Again, telling the difference between conventionals and compostables, like all the issues we talked about and barriers that we're facing. That's what the questions that they're asking right now, is whether or not they're going to accept this as feedstock. And they're making a determination. They're going to take a vote in October at their fall meeting, the National Organic Standard Board. At that point, they would make a recommendation to the USDA National Organic Program, who would ultimately adopt it or not, who would say yes to this acceptable feedstock or not. We'll see. It looks like, though, from what I gather, that fruit stickers are going to probably be considered compostable because that's a natural piece, and because the European Union passed that recently, that all fruit stickers have to be compostable. That bags or liners that contain food scraps, it's looking like those may be acceptable because they directly are in contact with food scraps and contribute to more food scraps entering compost facilities. So those are, I think, the two items that they're likely going to pass. The other food service packaging material that we would like to see included, very questionable and yet to be, that'll hopefully be determined soon. Sorry for my really long-winded answer.
It's complex.
Oh my gosh, is it? Yes.
Yeah, it's just because we are having an opposite experience in India, where all our packaging is in PLA, and we have so many complaints of it disintegrating on the shelf. And then and of course you're talking about different temperature and different moisture level, but it's a challenge, and we are kind of really playing with it and getting it right. So I hope all this kind of comes to a closure, and there is clear kind of understanding on what works and what doesn't. I'm totally going to pivot onto something which has been so interesting for me, because I was telling Alex before we started recording, I want to be like Asim when I grow up, because this is coming from this idea that I was talking to one of your guys, and I'm totally forgetting his name, and he told me, I said, "Where's Asim?" And this was at NRA, and he said, "Oh, he's in Atlanta working on product development with a bunch of engineers, and that's what he does full time now." So that's really fascinating, and I'm like, okay, I need to give up this executive role, and I need to really do what I enjoy. So are you guys totally excited about what is going to come out of that lab as we go along with the kind of focus? How is that working out?
Yeah, I think that it is really exciting. And they are doing a lot of really cool, interesting things that just take so much time, right? So we don't get to peek behind that curtain very often, but it does seem to energize Asim and bring a whole new sort of enthusiasm to him, which is fun to see. And just as really being kind of living in the food service packaging world, it's just another distinction for us in the industry. And I think from their perspective, like the next generation of packaging, it's going to be made from natural waste or virgin materials with minimum to no chemical modifications. And then the last 30 minutes of conversation we just had, we won't need to have that anymore if that's really what it is, right? If there's no chemical modification and it really is natural waste or virgin materials, packaging could just be treated like food scraps, and disposal decisions become a lot easier. Composters' trust increases, and we just end up in a totally different place in
And
this
a single
conversation.
trash can then, huh?
Yeah,
Everything
well,
goes into a single, that's so much easier. All the
yeah,
food waste and the food service waste in one trash can, and it goes into composting, all of it. That'll be so amazing. I look forward to
right?
that world. I'm sure all three of us look forward to that world.
Definitely.
Okay, I'm going to take this towards closure, and of course, you're free to add in anything else. But two last questions. So, as you know, World Centric has been this trendsetter. And of course, there's this whole focus on new products and new technologies and new chemistry and all of that. How do you guys see World Centric impacting in the next, say, 5 years horizon? What will be your dream? Erin, maybe you go first.
Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball to really to do. But what excites me is innovation and really working again with the natural materials without chemical modification. I want to just emphasize that because I think it's going to alleviate a lot of the issues and the unfortunate kind of pressure we have as the compostable plastics are viewed like to lump these all together is really unfortunate, but that's just how it's evolved over the last 20 years. So looking forward, I think we have a lot of smart individuals that are dedicating their professional careers to this, and I feel excited. I feel motivated to continue because I know that there's policy to support this. I know that there's more funding going to be available to support it, and people that are more motivated than ever because our planet is burning and they see it we're experiencing it right now. That I think that there's just this overall excitement around finding these better solutions. And I also am excited about the idea that we're going more towards the reusable space. I think that that's a overall better. I mean, our waste is a human invention, and I wish that we would, go back a century ago where we didn't have the massive amount of waste that we've created as humans. I think I'm motivated and excited because in California, and in many other states, there's extended producer responsibility bills that are making producers then responsible for the end of life of their products. So finally, large brands, big corporations are going to have to pay for the problems that they're producing on our planet. And in California specifically, there's incentive for reuse and refill systems statewide to manage it in a more efficient way that hopefully my kids will understand and see that they don't need to use something for 20 minutes as a single-use disposable item. I would love to see a world where they can understand and appreciate the resources and understand that everything that we use, even if it is a reusable, comes from somewhere, that it's impactful, and that we can ultimately make better decisions around how to not just reduce it, but to eliminate it. That's my take.
Super. Ellie.
I would love and can kind of see this trending this direction for World Centric to just be as commonly known as Nike or Chobani, right? Like I want World Centric to become a household recognized, trusted white hat brand. And I think what the exciting innovation that we have happening could launch us into spaces beyond just food service, and give us that recognition that retail gives us, right? But it could be, who knows, if it's your laundry detergent or if it's your lipstick case or if it's your, I don't know, Amazon package, whatever that is. I think World Centric, it would be really cool to have World Centric be at the tip of everybody's tongue for all of those reasons. And the other reason I say that, and I think for the next 5 years, the more money we make, the more money we give away. And so I think the contribution that World Centric does beyond the packaging space to support those organizations is invaluable. And to be able to continue to give away millions of dollars to those hardworking organizations that are doing such incredible work is what I would like to see.
That's brilliant. I was just imagining not just known as Chobani, but maybe Chobani packed and World Centric. Yes.
Yes, even better. Yes.
Yeah, it's like Intel inside, World Centric outside. That'll be kind of cool. Okay, that takes me to my final question, and maybe Elly, you start this time. What does good garbage mean to you?
Yeah, I have been thinking about that, and I don't know if you can tell, but sometimes I go to humor. I deflect. I deflect with humor, and so if anybody is from the Rochester, New York area, and have heard of a garbage plate, that is some good garbage. So you can have a look at that. But yeah, or a taste of that. It's definitely an experience. But in seriousness, good garbage to me is something that's designed for circularity, right? Like, so that it's a material that can be put in the right place. If we get to that one bin choice, I think that's going to solve a lot of our problems. But a material that can be easily sorted to end up in the right place to still extract the highest value that it has left to give, because so much of what we discard still retains a lot of useful value.
Erin.
It's a really interesting question because it feels like an oxymoron, like good garbage. It just seems impossible in some ways because again, waste is human generated. However, I think when I started, I told you my story about reduce, reuse, recycle campaign when I was younger. But in my adult life and as a sustainability professional, I think there's 2 R's that are missing, which is refuse and replace. So I think when we start with those two first, like refuse, do you actually need this item? Refuse it. Don't use it. Don't buy it. Just eliminate it from the get-go. Replace it. So like our grandma used to do with mending all of your clothes before you actually discard them, using higher quality materials from the beginning and having it extended its life. Like those 2 elements to me are so critical to our, again, and I'll echo what Elly said about the circularity, keeping our circular economy in motion, keeping the idea of a closed loop system actual, like in a practical way, is very fascinating. And I think that plays with good and garbage. And I do think that if something can be truly repurposed, upcycled more than one time, and I think, as Elly said, put it to its highest and best use, that is good garbage.
Both wonderful answers. I was looking forward to what you guys came up with. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. And of course, I'm a fan of World Centric for years. It's been amazing to have you guys on the show. Just reminds me of Asim, and that's so much happiness for me. So thank you so much for being here and talking about the things you guys are doing, and more than that, doing the things that you guys are doing and living this life of purpose. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate
This was
it.
wonderful.